والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We only have like 6 minutes before Isha, so I'll just quickly remind you of what we did last time and then tell you what we're going to do inshallah today. After Isha we will resume. So where we started Bab al-Salah, which is the chapter of prayer. This is one of the most important, if not the most important chapter in fiqh when you're studying an introductory text, because introductory texts don't go into details anyway. So when you're studying the financial aspect of Islam, the political aspect, the criminal aspect of Islam, talking about the criminal law, all that is not covered in detail in introductory texts anyway, because they're just introductory, they're simple. However, when it comes to rituals like zakah and siyam and salah and hajj, they're covered quite well. And of course, salah being the most important of all five obligatory rituals, it will get the large bulk of the study. So it's important for me that we go through it properly, that you take time to understand at least how to do it according to the Shafiee madhab, at least to that. And then, inshallah, once we start studying other texts in different madhab, you will learn how to do the same in the different madhab and understand the different opinions that exist. I will cover major different opinions. I'll talk about like the major differences that are important that may influence your prayer or cause you to find some difficulty. So we read the first couple of parts. We talked about the timings for prayer. That was the first part of that, the first chapter within this chapter. And then we talked about the salawat al-fard. What are the 5 obligatory prayers? What are the masnunat? What are the recommended prayers? What are the supererogatory prayers? What are the daily or regularly recommended prayers? We talked about the 12 rak'ah and how it is. And then the last thing we talked about are 3 emphasized sunnah prayers that are not attached to anything, which is salat al-layl, which is just praying during the night time, qiyam al-layl, whether it's before you sleep or after you sleep, as long as it's between maghrib and fajr, it's called qiyam al-layl. It's one of the greatest acts of additional worship that you will ever do in your life. And if you've never done it before, I highly recommend that you do, because it will grant you this sense of closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this level of khushu' and serenity that you will not find doing any other act of worship. It is very, very specific. It will bring your heart closer to Him in ways that nothing else, in a way that nothing else can do it. So I highly recommend that you try qiyam al-layl. At least maybe 2 rak'ah a night even. Just when everyone's sleeping, stand up, recite some of the Quran, and just try to find the beauty of prayer. Because you cannot find the beauty of salah if you don't try qiyam al-layl at least a few times in your life. If you don't, and that is not even saying that the importance of making it regular, meaning every night do it. That's my recommendation. Do it every night. But if not that, at least try once a week or twice a week. Wallahi, you'll find the barakah in your life like nothing else. Wallahi, and it'll enlighten your heart. Yes. Any time between maghrib and fajr. You just don't sleep. Doesn't matter. You sleep, you don't sleep, doesn't make a difference.
If you sleep and wake up, that's tahajjud.
Yeah, well, tahajjud is under qiyam al-layl. Qiyam al-layl is the big umbrella word that everything that you pray from maghrib to fajr will fall under. Right? But tahajjud is specific. It's talking about after you fall asleep. And it talks about salat al-duha, which is the 2 rak'at that you pray from around 8:30 to around 11. And after that, salat al-tarawih, which is of course the qiyam al-layl of Ramadan that happens during Ramadan, and the importance of that. And we talked about the difference of opinions regarding the timings, the number of rak'ah, so 8 or 20. And we said that the prominent opinion among all 4 madhahib is 20, because of what Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu did, because of the purpose of this prayer. The purpose of the prayer is to recite the Quran. Doing it only 8 rak'ah may not allow you to recite the whole Quran, because the rak'ah becomes very long. So they made it 20 so that you could recite the whole Quran. The whole point of Taraweeh is that you listen to the book. And that's why all around the world they do 20. The Prophet ﷺ himself didn't do more than 11, but ﷺ, his 11 rak'ah would cover 5 or 6 hours of the night. So if you want to do 8 or 11 like him ﷺ, if you want to stick to the number that he stuck to, then stick to the timing that he stuck to as well. Or else understand that this is an open issue, it's a recommended action, so it doesn't really matter. Numbers aren't very important and timings aren't very important. As long as you're doing it for the sake of Allah, you're trying to get ajr. Yes. What do you mean? It's qiyam al-layl in general. But that was at the beginning of his bi'tha sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when qiyam al-layl was obligatory upon him. Right? And he was told to pray the whole night, or half the night, or a little less, or a bit more. He was told to pray as much as he can, at least half the night, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if not a bit less or a bit more. And then after that, the last ayah of Surah Al-Muzammil changed the regulation, or the ruling for him, which is the third of the night is the least he can do, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But that's for him, alayhi salatu wasalam. Any part of the night, but the third is the least he can do for him, but not for all of us. It's not obligatory for us. So he was, certain things were made obligatory upon him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that was not made obligatory upon you. Out of the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you don't have to do a third of the night every single night. He had to, alayhi salatu wasalam. 3 motives? Well, number one, okay, three things I'll tell you that will help you out. If you're doing memorization of Quran, if you memorize anything of the Quran, if you're continuously memorizing, Qiyam al-Layl is the perfect time for you to revise what you memorized. There's no time better in the world. That's number one. Number two, and this is practical. I know that the practicality it's a practical point, which is you will find that your heart will calm down in ways that it doesn't in any other act of worship within the day, within your life. Meaning when you make sujood during Qiyam al-Layl, you will find serenity and closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like no other time. The third thing is that you learn how to make dua. You learn how to make dua. The only time you actually learn how to make dua properly is when you do Qiyam al-Layl, because you're tired, it's the end of the day, everyone's sleeping, so you don't have much to think about, and you can actually make dua properly. So those are 3 points I can think of that would actually really be good incentives for you to start Qiyam al-Layl. After the salah, inshallah, we will start by reciting the second chapter within this chapter is وَشَرَائِطُ الصَّلَاةِ قَبْلَ الدُّخُولِ فِيهَا خَمْسَةُ أَشْيَاء. And the conditions that need to be met before you start prayer are 5 things. You start 5 things. So conditions.
What about Salat al-Jumu'ah?
Jumu'ah gets exactly what Dhuhr gets. So whatever we give Dhuhr, we give Jumu'ah. So if you're of the opinion that Dhuhr gets 4 before and 2 after, then that's what you get for Jumu'ah. If you are the opinion of 2 before, 2 after, that's what you get for Jumu'ah. If you are the opinion of 4 before, 4 after, that's what you get for Jumu'ah. So whatever you view Dhuhr is how you view Jumu'ah for the Sunan. Okay.
And Jumu'ah is a Fard Ayn?
Yes, of course.
When you're
Jumu'ah is exactly like Dhuhr.
when you're resident, but not when you're
yeah, so when it'll come up like there's a specific point where we'll talk about Jumu'ah, like it's coming up inshallah. So Jumu'ah has its own little section that we'll study inshallah. Okay, so what we're talking about now are the conditions that you need to meet in order for you to enter salah, meaning the stuff that you have to have before you're able to actually start your prayer. So shara'itul salah qabla ad-dukhuli fiha khamsat ashya. There's 5 things that you have to have, 5 conditions you have to meet in order for you to be able to start prayer. Number 1, taharatul a'da'i min al-hadathi wal-najas. So let's I'm going to put them down inshallah, so because these are important that they're understood. Alright, so what are the conditions we need to meet before we start a prayer? Number 1, taharatul a'da'i min al-hadathi wal-najas, meaning the body has to be pure from both hadath, which is religious impurity, and najas, which is physical impurity. Right? So religious impurity, which is that you did not lose your wudu, meaning you have wudu, right? And that you have done ghusl if you need ghusl. That's what hadath means. Najas is physical impurity like feces, urine, etc. Anything that would cause you, that you'd have to remove in order for your prayer to be acceptable. So the first thing is purity. First thing, purity. So, the purity of the body from both religious and physical impurities. When I say religious impurities, what do I mean? I mean that you have wudu and you've done ghusl if you need ghusl, right? So if you can't pray if you just allowed, if you let go of some gas, that means you have hadath, right? Now you have religious impurity that you have to fix by doing wudu. Physical impurity is if you have actual feces or urine or blood or pus or whatever on yourself, then you have to remove that. So that's the first condition in order for you to start prayer. It's a condition, it's not a part of prayer. Okay? Number 2, وَسَتْرُ الْعَوْرَةِ بِلِبَاسٍ طَاهِرٍ. Satr al-awra is covering the part of the body that is mandatory to cover. Right? بِلِبَاسٍ طَاهِرٍ, with clothing that is not impure, with pure clothing, meaning clothing that doesn't have on it impurities like feces, urine, pus, blood, etc. That makes sense? So what is the parts of the body that need to be covered for a male? Yeah, so navel to knee. And there's discussions within the Sunnah. We'll talk about that inshallah when we come to it, which is difference of opinion regarding the knees and even parts of the thigh. But for the Shafi'iyya, we go from navel to knee. So as long as you, as a male, you're standing in prayer, wearing shorts that cover from just where your navel is to where your knee is, then you can pray with that. That's fine. All right. For the lady, it's everything. It's everything but her face, hands, and in certain opinions, feet. In certain opinions, but the majority don't. So for her, it's everything but her hands and her face. So number 2. Covering al-awra. With pure clothing. And when I say pure, it means that it doesn't have impurities on it. It doesn't have feces, urine, pus, blood, etc. Okay? Yeah.
So growing up, some people would say like, oh, you have to cover your shoulders.
Yeah, so there are certain recommendations for imams and for people who are praying, covering certain parts like their heads or their shoulders. Now we'll talk about that inshallah later, but there's a lot of different opinion regarding that, and there's a lot of lack of evidence for a lot of it, meaning there's not that much. As long as you're covering from your navel to your knee, you can stand and you can pray, and your prayer is fine, and there's nothing, you haven't done anything wrong, and there's no reason for anyone to come and tell you that what you did was obviously. If you're just wearing shorts, you shouldn't be standing imam in a masjid. It's ridiculous, maybe, you know, but generally speaking, the salah is valid. So if you were to do that, then your salah is acceptable. Yeah, it is more of a urf. Certain respect the I guess the sanctity of certain things. Okay, that's number 2. All right, number 3. والوقوف على مكان طاهر. Or on pure ground. Now I'm using the word pure because that is the way it's explained in the text itself. However, pure means that it doesn't have physical impurities, meaning you're not praying on a piece of land that has feces, urine, blood, or pus, etc. on it. So as long as the earth, like the Prophet ﷺ said, جُعِلَتْ لِيَ الْأَرْضُ مَسْجِدًا وَطَهُورًا, meaning all earth is a place for me to pray. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave it all to me, as long as the place that you're actually praying does not have impurities on it. So you can say pure ground or a pure place, or just say a ground or place that lacks impurities or does not have impurities on it. Yes?
So what happens if you're wearing shorts and your knee becomes uncovered? But when you're
so because there's difference of opinion, you're okay. Because there's difference of opinion regarding the knee, whether the knee is actually awra or not. However, if the saw'a, which is basically the private parts in front or behind, are exposed for a long duration during the prayer, or for the whole prayer, then your prayer is invalid. And we'll come to that inshallah soon. Like there's going to be a part where we talk about that in a bit more detail inshallah. Okay? So that's number 3. Number 4. وَالْعِلْمُ بِدُخُولِ الْوَقْتِ. الْعِلْمُ بِدُخُولِ الْوَقْتِ means, and the knowledge of the beginning of the prayer time, meaning knowing that the prayer time has begun. So you have to know that the prayer time has begun. You can't pray Dhuhr at 10 o'clock. Right? It's too early. Or you can't pray Maghrib when the sun is still up in the sky, because the time for the prayer has not begun. So the beginning of prayer time is a condition for prayer. It's a condition for prayer. It's not a part of it, it's a condition for it. The last one was istiqbalul qiblati, is facing the qibla. I'm going to teach you right now how Imam al-Shafi'i faces the qibla, because he faces it, his understanding of it is different than the jumhur. The jumhur have a different understanding of facing the qibla. So right now, if you were to take a compass and it would give us exactly where Mecca is, which is basically the line standing perpendicular to the line that we have in the masjid. So for the Imam al-Shafi'i, I would have to stand exactly towards the qibla, exactly facing the qibla. Right? If I were to deviate from the qibla, I'm saying like this, I'm exactly towards the qibla, 10 degrees in any direction, for the Imam al-Shafi'i, your prayer now is invalid. Right? For the Imam Shafi'i, you have to face the Qibla exactly. That is his ruling on the matter. Right? Of course, if you can. If you don't know that, we'll talk about when you don't have to or when you're allowed not to. For Abu Hanifa, rahmatullah alayhi, he has an opinion that Imam Malik and Ahmed also followed. Ahmed has two opinions in his madhab. One of his opinions also stands by what Imam Shafi'i said. But the Jumhur, and this is what Imam Abu Hanifa says, he says, if a beam of light was to leave the Kaaba right now, right, as long as it's hitting a part of your chest, your prayer is acceptable. Right? So like this is hitting the full of my chest. Like this is hitting 3/4 of my chest. Like this, it's hitting maybe 1/3 of my chest. Like this, it's hitting maybe 1/10 of my chest. Like this, it's no longer hitting my chest at all. Now the prayer is invalid for Abu Hanifa, right? And the Jumhur. But everything else, so basically, almost 178 degrees, right? Your prayer is acceptable for the Jumhur, right? Given that there has to be a reason for that deviation. Meaning it's done by mistake, it's not done by purpose. Meaning it's not like you knew the Kaaba was this way, and then you decide to deviate. It was just either that's how the masjid was built, or that's how the saf was, or you weren't 100% sure, or there's given that there's some reason. But for the Imam Shafi'i, you have to face the Qibla exactly. Alright, if you don't face the Qibla perfectly, then for him, tabtul as-salah. It's a condition for prayer for him. You have to actually face it properly. Yeah.
Up to 10 degrees of deviation for Imam Shafi'i?
Yeah, not even that. So some scholars say 5 degrees in each direction only. That's all he'll accept. For the Jumhur, no, as long as a light that was leaving would hit a part of your chest, then you're good, right? If you're standing exactly perpendicular to the Kaaba's Kaaba's direction, then it's only going to hit your side, then it's no longer acceptable. But if you're a bit towards it, then the salah is valid for the Jumhur, and Abu Hanifa is the one who kind of coined the concept. All right, so these are the 5 conditions for prayer. These are conditions. Conditions are different than obligatory actions. They're very different. Obligatory actions, or arkan or fara'id, are parts of prayer. These are not parts of prayer. There's something outside of prayer that has to be met in order for you to be able to pray to begin with.
How do we determine the direction in this part of the world? Not straight.
Yeah, of course. So here you go. Even though when you look at the globe, when they try to make the globe two-dimensional instead of to put it on a flat piece instead of a sphere, which is, or what the globe is, you think that London is higher than Mecca, so you think it would be east and southeast. But the closest way to go from London to Mecca is to take a route of northeast, right? So, and they have the degree almost exactly, and you follow whatever the scholars of geography tell you to follow. That's why Abu Hanifa, to him, where are we in terms of Mecca? And we're just talking about east and west. بين المشرق والمغرب قبلة. Are we east or west of Mecca? No, west of Mecca. So you pray to east. That's all he cares. The rest of it doesn't matter. That's why I'm telling you, the Jumhur, the details doesn't matter. Are you west of Mecca? Yes, pray to east. Are you east of Mecca? Yes, pray to the west. That's all. The rest of it, they don't care. Like, the details aren't important to them. Imam Shafi'i is like, no, exactly where it's going to be. He's a bit more meticulous, and he's a bit more accurate in the way he wants the Qibla to be studied or found. Does that make sense? So the Jumhur is much more.
What about during traveling, if you are not sure?
Okay, so we'll come to that in a second. But I'm talking about generally speaking for the Qibla. So these are the 5 conditions. Number 1, your body has to be pure from both physical impurities like feces, urine, etc., and religious impurities, which is you have wudu and you've done ghusl if you need ghusl. You have to cover the awrah, which is for the man from the navel to knee, and for the woman everything but her face, hands, and in some opinions her feet. It has to be covered with a pure piece of clothing, meaning clothing that doesn't have on it. So if you're praying with a piece of clothing that has feces on it, your prayer is invalid because you should have removed that with water. You have to remove it before you pray. The number 3, praying on pure ground, in a pure place, meaning place that doesn't have also those impurities on them. Any place in the world is fine. So you can stand in the middle of, of downtown and pray as long as there's no actual visible impurities where you're praying. Number 4, knowing that the prayer time has begun, so you have to know that it actually started. You can't pray outside the time. And number 5, you have to face the qibla. And I explained to you, can someone give me a tissue? I explained to you how Imam Shafiee views facing the qibla in contrast to the Jumhur. Okay. ويجوز جزاك الله خير ويجوز ترك القبلة في حالتين, and it is permissible for you to not face the qibla in two situations. Number 1, في شدة الخوف, in extreme fear, and of course this is regarding war times. I'm going to share something a bit personal for a moment, just so during a brief period of time in jail in Syria, you weren't allowed to pray. It was completely, you weren't allowed to do it, not on your own and not in jama'ah. You weren't allowed to do it. So you had to pray in any direction they had you sit, because you weren't allowed to even face the direction you wanted to face. Meaning you couldn't face the qibla. You're going to pray sitting down anyway, and basically not even making the movements, because if they see you, you're going to get beaten. So you have, but you would like to face the qibla, and you weren't even allowed to do that. Meaning they would face you in whatever direction they wanted, and you had to pray that way. So sometimes 5 or 6 of us would be praying at the same time, each one facing a different direction. Like the guy, I am facing the guy, and the guy is facing me back, right? And so examples like that, fi shiddat al-khawf, when there's extreme fear, war, or anything that is similar to it, where you can't really make a choice, then you don't have to face the qibla. You face whatever you want. Why? وَلِلَّهِ الْمَشْرِقُ وَالْمَغْرِبُ فَأَيْنَمَا تُوَلُّوا فَثَمَّ وَجْهُ اللَّهِ. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala owns both the east and the west. Wherever you direct your face, you're directing it to your Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it's a matter of identity. When we direct ourselves towards the Kaaba, it's a reminder. You have an origin, right? You're bound by a center. There's a center for who you are, both physically, religiously, and mentally. You never forget. That's where it began, and that's where you belong, and that's what you belong to. And that concept is important. That's why every time we pray, we look, where's Mecca? We're thinking, where is Mecca? Where is the land of Nuh and Ibrahim and Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam? Where it all began, and then you face your center again. You never lose track of where your center is. That makes sense? So it's a matter of identity. That's important that we've lost a bit, and I guess in the way that we view it, but that's what it is. So, but if you can't, then you can face basically in any direction you want to face, or you have to. And of course the Quran talks about فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ فَرِجَالًا أَوْ رُكْبَانًا. If you're scared, then either you can pray on your horses, you can pray as you're walking, pray in any form that you need to pray. The second situation where you don't have to pray the qibla, وَفِي النَّافِلَةِ وَفِي السَّفَرِ عَلَى الرَّاحِلَةِ. So if you're praying a nafila, if you're praying a sunnah prayer, any sunnah prayer, anything that's not one of the 5 mafrudat, any sunnah prayer, as you are traveling, if you're on a rahila. Rahila means a means of transportation. Back then it was a mule, a donkey, a camel, or a horse. Today it's a car, a train, a plane. So a nafila, you don't have to actually even try for the qibla. Just wherever you're sitting, just kabbir and pray your nafila. However, for fard, you have to try and face the qibla. Now these are the 2 permissibilities, or the 2 situations where Shafiee or Imam Abu Shuja' for the Shafi'iyya said that you're all right not to face the qibla. There may be other situations today that are the result of life changing a bit. So if you're on a plane and you don't know what prayer to pray, but you've prayed Maghrib and now you're going towards the west, so it's going to be dark the whole time, so you want to pray Isha, right? It's prayer Isha time. Sometimes if you're going the opposite direction, you have no idea what to pray, because it's one day, moments it's Isha, the moments it's Fajr, and then it's immediately after that Dhuhr, and then you lose track of it. But let's say you want to pray Isha, and you can't get up. You actually can't stand up, there's no space, and the qibla is in the exact opposite, it's not a good direction, meaning it's not in the direction you're sitting, it's not in the direction the opposite of your sitting, it's actually perpendicular to how you're sitting, so there's really no way for you to do it. And if you can't do it and there's no place in the plane, then you pray in any way you can pray. So that's another exception to the rule, where you can't really change the circumstances that you are in. Specifically if you're flying, you're using airlines that don't have rooms or prayer rooms or place for you to actually pray, or there's no possibility for you doing it. So there are rules, or there are situations, circumstances, exceptions where you can't face the qibla, so that's fine, pray. Now the only thing why I brought this up is that first, there's difference of opinions among scholars regarding whether if you do that, and if for a fard, do you have to repeat it later or not? So that's where the difference of opinion lies. The Shafi'iyya, they say you have to repeat it later. So if you're on a plane and you can't move and you have to pray dhuhr, you pray dhuhr and asr, but you have to make up for them later on once you're on the ground. Other opinions exist that say you don't have to. I kind of side with that a bit, but regardless, there's two opinions. So if you want to be safe, you can just repeat them later. And if you feel good about what you did, then inshallah, there's an opinion that's acceptable. Yes.
The question I had was like, when you are on a plane or going to or from east or west, whatever it is, the time does change. Like it could be like coming back from, let's say we're going to Afghanistan, right? When you're going there, it becomes like lose a day. Come back, you gain a day, right?
So what you do is for salah is what you do for fasting, for siyam. Whenever you get in the plane, now turn your clock to your destination's timing and pray whatever they have. All right, so you can do that. You're allowed to do that as well.
As soon as you get into the plane.
Yeah, you're allowed to start praying and fasting based on what they're doing.
I was in a place, a new place, I don't know and there is no mosque or anything. And I have no idea which side I have to say my prayer. I was visiting some relatives. So and then I just...
So you can always use the sun, because if you know that you're west of Mecca, so you want to pray to the east, you just look where the sun is and just pray to the east. So and your prayer is acceptable if you do that, inshallah. And you always have to do tahri, meaning you always have to find the qibla. You have to spend some time trying to find out. If you can't find, pray. Right? And then whatever, some scholars tell you if you find out that you're totally wrong, for a fard you have to repeat. Some of them say you don't have to repeat. I kind of side with that. Okay, we move on. Faslun, in the second, yes?
I was going to say, I think in the Maliki school, if you just try your best, and if it's within the prayer time, if you find out if somebody tells you before the prayer time is expired, then you can redo your prayer. But if it's already passed, you know the next prayer time, then don't worry about it.
And for the Malikiyya, and the thing is, because there's such like I said, istiqbal al-qibla, you have 178 degrees of you being right. So you don't have to repeat. If the qibla is like this, and I end up praying like this, and I find out I'm good, I don't have to repeat anything. I was within, besides the Shafi'iyya whom we're studying the text, we're good. We don't have to repeat that again. Okay. وَأَرْكَانُ الصَّلَاةِ 18 رُكْنًا. We're just going to read, inshallah, the arkan al-salat today. So the obligatory actions of prayer, actually, the pillars of prayer is the better way for us to call them. The pillars of prayer. 18 ركنا, or 18 pillars. There are 18 pillars for prayer. What you're going to find eventually is that the madhahib have different numbers for the pillars of prayer. Like not all of them have the exact same number. They have similar ideas, like the similar concepts are there, and there are certain things that they don't agree to. So the first pillar of prayer is always, right, a niyyah. So always a niyyah. Only the Hanafiya say that the niyyah is a condition. So the Hanafiya have a specific understanding, so they have 6 conditions for prayer. The 6th condition for them is niyyah. They see niyyah to be a condition for prayer, not a part of prayer, meaning which also there's logic in that as well. You can see the light in that. But for the Jumhur, a niyyah is a pillar of prayer, because if you don't know what you're doing, then you're not doing it. Number 2, وَالْقِيَامُ مَعَ الْقُدْرَةِ.
Quick question about the last one.
Yes, go ahead.
If you were driving to Toronto and you're in the car and you're actually driving, can you pray nafil prayers while you're driving?
Sure. Just don't curse at the guy who's passing you during prayer, and you should be fine, inshallah. Yeah, so that's not a problem at all. But you can do fard. You have to stop and pray. Yeah, that's no problem at all. Okay. So the question was, if you're driving to a city, can you pray sunnah while driving? So yes, you can pray sunnah while driving. Just as long as you don't make too many movements and too many gestures, and you're not turning on the radio and turning it off and playing with the AC. Like as long as you're not, while driving you can do it. Yeah. Okay. That's number 2. Al-qiyam al-qudra means standing if capable of standing. So, and this is important for the fard, because for sunnah it's different. These are for fard, by the way. For sunnah, if you can stand but you choose not to, that's fine. So the Prophet ﷺ prayed sunnah standing, prayed sunnah sitting, and prayed sunnah laying down, even though he had the physical ability to start prayer standing up, but he didn't, because it's sunnah. Sunnah, there's certain conditions that apply to it. But for fard, for dhuhr, asr, maghrib, isha, and fajr, if you're capable, if your legs can carry you then you have to stand at the beginning of the prayer. Meaning you have to make takbirat al-ihram standing up. And then after that, you can later sit down during the prayer, or have a chair behind you. But if you're capable of standing, you have to. It's a rukn. It's a pillar of prayer. What does a pillar mean? I mean, what does the word pillar indicate in prayer? It indicates that if you leave it, whether on purpose or because of forgetfulness, you have to repeat it. You have to bring it back again. If you leave it on purpose, your prayer is immediately invalid. So for some reason you say, I don't want to, right? Then your prayer is invalid. If you forget it, you have to go back and do it again. Sujood as-sahw is not enough. You have to do it again. So if you forget one of the pillars, the ones that can be forgotten, of course, like for niyyah, if you forget that, then your prayer just doesn't count, because that means you did something you didn't know what you were doing. If you didn't have niyyah, that means what were you doing? What was that? Like, niyyah means that you know what you're doing, right? So qiyam ma'al standing if capable. If you can do it, then you have to do it. If you don't do it, forgetfulness, then you have to get that first rak'ah again. You have to repeat the first rak'ah again, and then do sahw, right? And if you didn't on purpose, like you sat down even though you could, then your prayer is actually invalid. So any of the pillars, the meaning why we call them pillars, and I'm going to have wajibat in a second, then I'm going to have recommendations, I'm going to have why they're called pillars, is because if you leave it on purpose, then your prayer is immediately invalid, and if you forget them, then you have to repeat them. You can't just do sahw. You have to actually repeat what you left out. Yes.
Does it have any time limit for forgetting it? Let's say if you don't remember it immediately for hours, let's say.
No, whenever you remember it, you can just do it again. And we'll explain that inshallah at the end. Yes?
You have to get out of the salah and then restart again? Or,
No, inshallah, let me just go through the pillars and then I'll give you examples of what's forgotten and how to make up for that, inshallah. So number 3, وَتَكْبِيرَةُ الْإِحْرَامِ. Takbir of ihram, or the beginning takbir, or the first takbir, or the initiating takbir, right? So that takbir is fard, is rukn in the Shafi'iyya, and it's shart in the Hanafi. It's also a condition for the Hanafiyyah. The Hanafiyas don't see it to be a part of prayer. They see it to be a condition for prayer again. That's their understanding of it. But it's a rukn. So if you start prayer, Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, that means that's it. The prayer is invalid because you didn't get the first pillar, which is Allahu Akbar, right? The movement of the hand is not, however, a rukn, just the words themselves or anything that is equivalent to them. Meaning the actual movement, no movements, no gestures of hands are fard or rukn in any of the prayers that we're going to, for any madhab of the madhab that we're going to study, right? So,
Has to be Arabic?
Sorry?
Has to be in Arabic?
For the Hanafiya, they have a different opinion. You'll see. There's a lot of different opinions regarding prayer. Right now we're learning the prominent position of the Shafi'iyya. That's all we're learning. The prominent position of the new Shafi'i madhab. There's actually a lot more, but we'll start with that. Only things that are worth noting, I'll note. We'll leave all the details, inshallah, when we study the texts of the different madhab, inshallah.
Can you repeat it again, the movement?
Yeah. So no movement, no gestures of hands during prayer is rukn, is pillar. The gestures are never rukn. They are something less than a rukn. But the wording is Allahu Akbar is a rukn. So if you don't do it at the beginning of your prayer, for some reason you start, that's why if you're coming in quickly, you're running in to pray, and the guy is doing ruku'ah, Allahu Akbar. Right? So what was that? That takbir was for what? Was that takbir for ruku'ah or was that takbir al-ihram? Either way, you just basically invalidated your own prayer. Meaning, that's why when you come in there doing ruku'ah, you have to make takbir al-ihram standing up. That's the rukn. The rukn is you're standing up and you make takbir al-ihram, and then wherever the imam is, go. Right? So if you run in Allahu Akbar and you're down, your prayer doesn't count. So just pay attention to that for future incidents, that you walk in, you make takbir al-ihram standing up, and then you move to where the imam is. Right? Because takbir al-ihram is a rukn. Yes.
Question, since I think almost all the madhahib agree that if you join the behind an imam and he's in the ruku right now, if you say takbir al-ihram before he says Sami Allahu liman hamidah, you count the rak'ah. You have to do that takbir and then the takbir again to his position, or just the first takbir?
Again, it's a widespread thing. For the Shafi'iyya, you have to be able to say Subhana Rabbi al-Azim at least once before he says Allahu Akbar. Before he says Sami Allahu liman hamidah. You have to be able to say Subhana Rabbi al-Azim wa bihamdihi once before he says Sami Allahu liman hamidah. That's the prominent position of the Shafi'iyya, but that's not for everyone. Again,
after the first takbir,
after you make your takbir. After you make your takbir. So it's a bit more complicated. There's a lot of different opinions here. I'll tell you the simplest of all, or the easiest of all. as long as you are capable of saying Subhana Rabbiyal Azim wa bihamdi once, before the Imam says Allahu Akbar for sujood, then you're good. Before he says Allahu Akbar for sujood, then you're good. Given that when you started Takbirat al-Ihram, the Imam was in ruku'. He was not in qiyam. So if you're saying Allahu Akbar and the Imam's in qiyam, you can't make ruku' and then come back again. That doesn't count. He has to be in ruku'. But if after you say Allahu Akbar, he's coming out from ruku', you can make ruku' and say Subhana Rabbiyal Azim wa bihamdihi. And if you stand up before he makes sujood, then you're fine. This rak'ah, you've counted, this rak'ah counts. So that's the easiest and the simplest and the most open of all the opinions that exist. Now all other opinions are much more strict than that. So generally speaking, if you come in ruku' and you don't have time, just miss it. No big deal. Just make up for it later on. Like don't. Obviously, we're not supposed to run and make noise and make. Again, just whatever you can do. The best to be safest is that you make ruku'. You do takbirat al-ihram. You make ruku' while the Imam is making ruku'. You say Subhana Rabbiyal Azim before he says Sami Allahu liman hamida. That is the safest, and that is the opinion that if you want to be the safest, and that's what I would follow that if I were you, because it's jama'ah. You want to get the ajr of jama'ah. So if you don't get that rak'ah, then just make up for it at the end, without going into too much detail of the different madhab and their opinions, because there's a lot of opinions here. All right, and number 4, al-Fatiha. Qira'at al-Fatiha is a pillar of prayer, right? And now you say, well, what happens during Jama'ah if he's reading out loud? That's a different thing. We'll come to that, inshallah. We'll talk about that. There's a lot of, I have to talk about a lot of opinions on that. But generally speaking, someone has to read Fatiha in a rak'ah. Someone has to do it. Either you, the Imam, someone has to do it. The rak'ah cannot survive if no one read Fatiha at all. So if you're praying alone, you definitely have to bring Fatiha. If you forget Fatiha, then that's a rukn, and you have to repeat the rak'ah. You have to repeat the rak'ah. So if you Allahu Akbar and then you started the surah, and you finished, and then you remember you didn't read Fatiha, you have to go and repeat that whole rak'ah, because of the fact that Fatiha is a rukn for the Shafi'i and for the Jumhur as well. وَبِسْمِ اللَّهِ الرَّحْمَنِ الرَّحِيمِ آيَةٌ مِّنْهَا. For the Shafi'iyya, their view, because this was written kind of early on in the Islamic history, before the qira'at were all well established, understood by everyone. So for the Shafi'iyya, their opinion on the matter is Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim is an ayah from Surah Al-Fatiha. It's not, and that's what we find in the masahif that we have. The Shafi'iyya recommend, for them it's important that it's read out loud. And then the other opinions like the Hanabila and the Malikiyya, that they're okay with it being read in secret. For the Shafi'iyya, if you don't read it out loud, you have to at least read it. So the point of this is that for the Shafi'iyya, if you don't say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim at all, then your Fatiha didn't count. And Imam Shafi'i was very strict on the concept of Fatiha. There's a narration that comes from him that is a bit weak, but it's there, that there are I think 14 or 17 shadda in Surah Al-Fatiha. If you miss one of them, your prayer is invalid. So he's very strict on the concept of Surah Al-Fatiha. For him, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is an ayah. So if you don't read Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim at all, then your prayer doesn't count. So if you're saying, you begin immediately Alhamdulillah without at least saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim secretively, then for Imam Shafi'i it doesn't count, but for the other madhahib, for the Jumhur, that's not the case. All right? And most of what we pray here, they don't read Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim out loud. That's a fiqhi difference of opinion. It's no big deal. Like whether you read it out loud or you read it with a low voice, doesn't make a difference. The only point that you need to learn from this is that the Imam Shafi'i and the Shafi'iyya view Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim as an ayah, so it has to be read, whether secretively or out loud. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4. The 5th point, al-ruku'. And the 6th point, al-itmi'nanu fihi. I'll write that in Arabic because I like the word. So performing ruku', of course, the rak'ah is called based on the fact that it has ruku'. So ruku' is a pillar. Al-itmi'nanu fihi is also a pillar for the Shafi'iyya. And we're going to find this word repeated, or tuma'nina, here it's written, ruku' wa tuma'ninatu fihi. So tuma'nina or itmi'nan means calmness. You have to achieve a certain level of calmness. So for the Shafi'iyya, if you're making ruku', right, and you go down, and if you come up immediately, so you go down like this, Allahu Akbar, Sami Allahu liman hamida, that invalidates your prayer. Your prayer is invalid because the concept of itmi'nan, of calmness within your ruku' was not met, so you actually lose your prayer. Now what is the measurement of tuma'nina? Go ahead.
You have to be able to stay long enough to say subhanallah, and basically like your limbs, they settle.
There you go. So, and that is the prominent position for the madhahib, which is the settlement or the settling of the limbs. Meaning you have to, everything has to just stay in place for a moment. So you can't be in motion. It can't be a movement. It has to be, okay, you move, then you settle. You stay there. Now, for the Shafi'iyya, it's to say Subhana Rabbi al-Azim wa bihamdihi. It's to say that whole thing at least once. That's the timing that is needed. It's something that is subjective. That is almost impossible to actually measure. It's almost impossible to measure. So it's something that you have to do on your own. Just know that for the Shafi'iyya and for many of the other madhahib, within their prominent positions at least, Tuma'nina, which is achieving calmness and settlement within a movement, is a pillar, just like the movement itself. So ruku' is a pillar, and also settling down in that and giving that enough time and calming down is also a pillar. I tell this to if you're praying at home and you're praying the marathon prayer where you're trying to break a world record within 29 seconds or 30 seconds to bring your prayer, it doesn't count. Because, at least for whom we're studying right now and for the prominent positions among scholars, why? Because you are not achieving tuma'nina in your movements. If you don't achieve tuma'nina in your movements, they are pillars, so you have to repeat the prayer or your prayer is invalid. Does that make sense? And this is for, fard. We're studying furud right now. This is all for the fard. We'll talk about sunan at the end of this, inshallah, as a side
behind the imam that didn't do that, and they were following the Shafi'i opinion, they would repeat their prayer, or they would...
Yeah, so that's, again, that's a big one, because there's a lot of difference of opinion regarding what do you do when your imam makes mistakes that will compromise the arkan. So what you're supposed to do is the moment he doesn't do it is you do tasbih, just as if he forgot a rukn. So let's say that your imam, he read Surah Al-Fatiha, and then he immediately, he went down to ruku', and then he went for sujood, right? Now he forgot rafi', you're supposed to say subhanallah and stand up. And wait for him to realize that he made that mistake. Now if he realizes that he made that mistake, then he'll stand up and he'll make sujood sahw and you'll do it with him at the end. If not, you have there's one of two opinions here. Either you do niyyat al-mufaraqa, so you have the intention of leaving the imam and continuing to prepare properly because you're not going to leave what you know is right to do what he knows what is wrong, or you follow the imam with the hope that he brings back that rak'ah at the end, that he fixes it later on. But that's a weaker opinion because he may not do that and then you have to repeat that rak'ah on your own. Right? Now, let's say that the imam actually does rafa', but he doesn't do itmi'nan because that's another pillar. So he stands up immediately and goes down. You're supposed to do tasbih. Subhanallah. Right? Because he didn't spend enough time. Now, if he refuses and keeps on going, then the same thing applies. That makes sense? So you do niyyat al-mufaraqa and continue your prayer on your own. But that is, of course, very subjective, and that can cause a lot of problems if the person is just playing around because he's like, oh, though, I'm used to spending 15 minutes in my ruku', you only did like 4. Like, no, there has to, as long as it's met the minimal criteria, which is just saying Subhana Rabbi al-Azim wa bihamdihi once, then you should be good. I'll stop here, inshallah. So these are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the 6 first pillars of prayer. We'll continue, inshallah, next Thursday. Next Thursday, inshallah, Isha will be 8. To my understanding, it will be 8 o'clock, so we'll pray Isha, and then we'll go an hour after Isha, inshallah. So it won't be 8 till 9, it'll be from Isha prayer, from after Isha prayer, an hour after that, inshallah. Yes? Tomorrow's halaqah, so what's happening tomorrow is that there's an imam coming to give the khutbahs, and he's going to give a lesson after Maghrib. Now, there's one or two things.